Hi, Nick Park here. I'm from Evangelical Alliance Ireland, and I'm here once again to share our weekly video message entitled It Might Be Friday, but Sunday's Coming. And today I'm in the Mourne Mountains, and I got up this morning to go for a walk, and I was walking through the forest when I came across this tower behind me. And it's just here, it's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it doesn't appear to serve any useful purpose. It's not beside any castles or significant buildings or anything like that. It's just a stone tower sitting on a hillside in the Mourne Mountains in the middle of a forest, and it's got a gate on it. And I looked around to see what purpose it could serve. Was it for some defensive purpose? Was it fortifications to protect something that used to be here and isn't here no more? I don't know. There's no plaque on it. There's nothing to tell me more about it. It's just a weird tower in the middle of nowhere with a gate. But then when I look through the gate, I discover there is a well inside. I can see a well of water there. And we know, of course, the Bible speaks about the life-giving properties of water, and how a well symbolizes something refreshing and something we can draw life from, draw water from the wells of salvation, as the word says. And yet here, the well is barred by a gate standing in the way. As a pastor, two things. One, I'm always looking for illustrations. You know, I'm reminded Bill Hybels, whenever he was still pastor of the Willow Creek Church and had been in that job for many, many years. He once said to his kids one morning, "Would you do something interesting for goodness sake? I need an illustration for my sermon on Sunday." So I'm always looking at things and finding illustrations and stories in them that help me communicate truth better, either for sermons or these days for videos as well. But here's something else as well. I'm always examining the church, not in a critical way. I'm not somebody who likes to tear the church down. I love the Church of Jesus Christ. You know, I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for the church. I was in a mess. My life was absolute misery. I was on my way to an early death in hell whenever the church showed love through some Salvation Army officers who sheltered me when I was homeless. So I love the church. You know, I've so much in my life that is good, including my wife and family, I owe to the church. And so I thank God for the church every day. But I'm always looking for ways that we can do church better. And I'm always examining the traditions that we have in the church. Now, I'm not an anti-tradition person. In fact, I find as I've got older, we've sometimes reintroduced older traditions into the church because we discover that they serve a good and a useful purpose to keep people's eyes fixed on Jesus. But looking at this well barred by a gate, I'm reminded of very different kinds of traditions that actually don't serve a good purpose, traditions that don't lead people to the wells of water of life, but actually bar people and keep them away from them. And yet traditions are immensely powerful. Some years back, the British Army conducted a time and motion study. They wanted to find out if they were doing things as efficiently as they could do. And this was back, I think, in the 1960s. So they brought in some of these time and motion experts to study every different division in the army, every different regiment, the different procedures they had and everything else, their training, and work out how they could do things more efficiently. And one of these time and motion experts was working with the artillery. And he noticed something, that when they fired the big guns, and today the artillery weapons are incredible things, much, much greater in power and scope than anything that used to go out in old days in the Battle of Waterloo and the cannons of those days. But every time they fired the gun, there was one of the soldiers in the artillery team would step back and go like that. And the time and motion expert is immediately drawn to that because what this guy is doing appears to serve no useless purpose. It's using up a member of the team and taking them out of doing anything else for no perceivable benefit. And so he said to them all, he said, "What's that guy doing?" And they said, "We don't know. That's part of our training. Somebody stands like that when we fire the gun." And the time and motion guy went, he asked more senior officers, right the way up to the generals. And they couldn't tell him the answer either. And eventually he found himself in a a nursing home, a home for retired military officers. And with these old people, 80, 90, even 100 years old, he showed a video to a group of them of the artillery gun being fired, and they're all nodding their heads, yes, that's the way it's done. And then he points to the guy who's standing like this, and he said, what's his job? Why is he doing that? And even these old officers are looking at each other and shaking their heads, and we don't know, that's the way we've always done it. Until one, the oldest of the lot, said, hang on a minute, it's coming back to me. He said that man's job was to hold the horses so they wouldn't bolt and run away at the sound of the gun firing. And of course, by this time, it had been generations since anyone had used horses to pull guns or be present when guns were fired. And yet still, every time an artillery piece was fired, there was a soldier stood like that. Why? Because of the power of tradition. Because sometimes it's easier to perpetuate a tradition rather than to question why it is there. And I believe we have traditions in the church which are like this tower and this gate. Don't even know why it's there. I don't know what it's for. But I do know that if somebody comes along and wants to get to that well, they can't, because this thing is barring them and standing in the way. And I'm painfully aware as a pastor that I don't want to have, in the church I'm involved in the leadership of, I don't want us to have traditions that would simply bar people from coming to draw water from the well of salvation. That instead of bringing people to Jesus would make it harder for them to come to Jesus. And I'm committed as a pastor to continually evaluating and looking at how our church does things and saying, is this serving a useful purpose? Is this glorifying God? Is this bringing people to Jesus, or is it time to retire this tradition altogether? You know, we really need God's wisdom for doing that. And I do believe that God gives us wisdom. He says in the book of James that if we lack wisdom, we should ask it. And so I would encourage all of you to look at your churches that you're involved with, whether you're a leader, a member, or whatever. But I would encourage you to look at it and say, God, the traditions we have, are they serving a purpose? Are they glorifying you? Or is it time to get shot of them? Or is it even time to create some new traditions that will bring people to Jesus more effectively? I believe the Holy Spirit will guide us as we do that. And meanwhile, look, it might be Friday, but Sunday's coming.